Good morning, and welcome back to Stronger Than Before. I'm your host, Kelly DeAndrea. And before we get into today's episode, I want you to do something for me. Wherever you're listening from, whether that's your car, your kitchen, on a walk, or folding laundry with one earbud in, I want you just to take a breath. In and out. Good. Let's begin. Because today we're talking about something every single person on this planet wants, whether they admit it or out loud or not. Happiness, not success, not money, not promotions, not bigger houses, not the next milestone on the list. Happiness. Here's what's strange though. We are living in the most connected, most convenient, most technologically advanced era in human history. We can order dinner from our phone without saying a word to another human being. We can see anyone's face from anywhere in the world in seconds. We have more access to information, more access to comfort, more access to opportunity than any generation before us. And yet, if you talk to almost anyone honestly, underneath the surface, anxiety's rising. Depression is increasing. Loneliness has become an epidemic, even among people surrounded by others all day long. Burnout has the most badge of honor we wear like a medal, something we almost brag about at dinner parties. We have become incredibly successful, at building our careers, building resumes, building followers, building homes with the right paint colors and the right furniture, but not always successful at building lives that we feel like something on the inside. So today I want to ask you a question that changed the entire direction of mine. What if happiness isn't something you find? What if it's not sitting out there somewhere waiting for you to stumble on it? The way you might find a good parking spot or a great deal on a flight. What if something you build brick by brick, choice by choice? And what if science has actually been telling us how to build it this whole time? And most of us, we weren't listening because we were too busy chasing the next thing. That whole world of today is what everything is about. And here is where we're heading. We're going to start with what we've been told about happiness and why so much of it is quietly wrong. And then we're going to talk about your brain and why it was never actually designed to make you happy in the first place. That one alone might change how you talk to yourself. And then we're going to talk about high achievers, the people who look like they have it all together, and why so many of them are the ones quietly failing or falling apart behind closed doors. And then we're going to look at the actual research that says creates a genuine happy life, because it's probably not what you've been told to chase. And I'm going to share something that I call the sunrise effect. An idea that changed the way I understand my own story. And I think it might do the same for yours. But by the end of this episode, my hope is that you walk away with something practical, not just a feeling that fades by lunchtime, not just inspiration you forget about Wednesday, not something that you can actually use, but use it tomorrow morning before your feet even hit the ground. And if you're new here, welcome. And I'm glad you found us. And if you've been with me for a while, thank you for coming back week after week as we figure this out together. I want to name something before we start because I think it matters. You might be sitting in that waiting room. I know, you're like, waiting room? Right now, and you don't even realize it yet. Maybe you describe your life as good, as fine, stable, it's even. And still, somewhere underneath that, there's a quiet feeling that something is missing. And you can't quite name what it is. That feeling isn't a malfunction, it's information. And by the end of this hour, I want you to understand exactly what it's telling you and exactly what you can do about it. So let's get into it. Okay, so what we've been told about happiness. And I'm going to tell you, we've kind of been sold a lie. One of the biggest lies our culture teaches us is this: when I get there, then I'll be happy. Think about it. When I graduate, when I get married, when I buy a house, when I make six figures, when I get the promotion, when the kids are a little older, when I finally retire. Maybe for you, it's not any of those. Maybe it's when the divorce is finalized, when the business finally turns a profit, when your parents finally say they're proud of you. We push happiness out in front of us like a finish line that keeps moving every single time we get close to it. We hit the mark we set for ourselves, and somehow The mark just relocates a little further out, a little higher up. That is what life is about. And somewhere along the way, our entire life becomes one big, giant waiting room. We are waiting to start living, waiting to start feeling okay, waiting for permission we asked, never, ever acquired, regard to waiting for permission we were never fully actually required to ask for. I know this because I lived there for almost 10 years. For almost 10 years, I wasn't the woman people thought I was. I showed up, I smiled. I worked. I raised my daughter. I paid the bills. I said, I'm fine so many times. It stopped feeling like a lie and start feeling like a script I memorized so well, I didn't even have to think about the lines anymore. From the outside, everything looked fine. Better than fine, actually. It looked like success. People would ask how I did it all, and I'd laugh and say something about coffee or caffeine and good planning. Inside, truly, I had disappeared. And I want to be really specific about this because I think this is the kind of depression people don't talk about enough. It doesn't get a movie made about it. It doesn't look dramatic from the outside. I wasn't crying every day. I wasn't lying in bed, unable to function. I was productive. I was successful. I showed up early. I answered every emails. I never missed a deadline, but I was invisible. That was the kind of depression people rarely talk about. The depression where you still answer emails, still make dinner, still lead meetings, still show up for everyone else's calendar every single time it's asked of you. But somewhere in there, quietly, without a single dramatic moment marking the change, you stop showing up for yourself. I remember specific mornings from the season more clearly than I remember most of the good ones. Sitting in my car in a parking lot before a meeting, edging off, just staring straight ahead for a few minutes, not because anything was wrong that day in particular, but because I couldn't remember the last time I just sat still and felt anything at all. I checked my lipstick in the visor mirror, walked in, and was completely on for the next 8 hours. One day, I remember asking myself a question that still breaks my heart a little time when I say it out loud. If I died tomorrow, would anyone actually know who I really was? Not the executive, not the mother, not the friend everyone could count on to handle it, me. That question wasn't really about dying. It was about realizing I had stopped living. I had built an entire life that looked good on paper and felt like almost nothing on the inside. Psychologists have a name for this, and it's called living from an external identity. That's what happens when your sense of worth gets attached to what you produce, instead of who you actually are underneath all of it. Your title, your paycheck, your performance review, your follower count, the way your house looks when people walk in, even the way your family looks from the outside, the vacation photos, the holiday card. None of that is bad on its own. There's nothing wrong with wanting a nice home or doing well in your job. But when that becomes the entire foundation of your identity, when it's the only place that you're allowed to find your worth, you're not truly living. You're surviving in a very well decorated life. And that's the distinction I want you to sit with for the rest of this episode. There's a massive difference between a life that looks successful and a life that feels alive. Most of us have been taught to chase the first one, quietly assuming the second one will just show up automatically as a reward, like a bonus at the end of the year. It doesn't work that way. And I want to give you a quick way to check yourself on this, because it's easy to nod along to this idea and then go right back to living the opposite of it. Ask yourself honestly, if every single external marker of your life disappeared tomorrow, the title, the paycheck, the way your calendar looks to people, would you still know who you are? Not who you'd become again eventually, who you are right now, underneath all of it. If the answer makes you uncomfortable, you're not alone. It made me deeply uncomfortable too, the first time I let myself actually sit with it. Instead of rushing past it to the next task on my list, the discomfort isn't a sign something's wrong with you. It's a sign you've been living from the outside in instead of from the inside out. And most of us were never taught any other way to live. Nobody sits you down at 18 and teaches you how to build an identity that isn't dependent upon your output. We get taught how to build a resume. We don't get taught how to build a self. Think about that question we asked each other at a party. The first one, before we know anything else about them, is simply, what do you do? Where do you work? What are you working on these days? Almost never. What lights you up? Who are the people you love? What do you believe about your own life? We're collectively agreed without ever discussing it out loud. That output is the fastest way to understand who somebody is. So of course we internalize that. Of course our worth gets tangled up with our productivity. We're trained into, it before we even had the chance to question it. And understand why that gap exists starts with understanding something most of us were never taught. How your brain actually operates is what it's actually built to do. I know when you have a stroke, you understand the brain. So let's talk about your brain and trying to, make you happy. So here's something that might reframe a lot of what you've been feeling. If you've ever wondered why happiness feels so hard to hold on to, even when your life looks fine on paper, imagine your brain is a smoke detector. Its job isn't to smell fresh cookies coming out of the oven. It's not designed to notice how lovely the light looks coming in through your kitchen window at 6 p.m. Its job is to smell smoke, to smell fire, to scream at you the second something might be dangerous, and to keep screaming until you deal with it. That's your brain. For hundreds of thousands of years, your brain evolved for one job and one job only. Keep you alive long enough to pass on your genes. Not to make you happy, not to make you fulfilled, not to help you find purpose or meaning or a sense of calm on Tuesday afternoons. Survive. That's it. That was the whole assignment for most of human history, played out across species living in caves, on savannas, in conditions where one wrong move meant the end. So your brain become exceptional at noticing danger, exceptional at noticing what's wrong, exceptional at scanning a room for that one thing that's off instead of the 10 things that makes that perfectly fine. Negative experience stick us longer and harder than positive ones. And there's a real reason for that. And it's not just bad luck. Your ancestors who remembered which berries were poisonous, which animals were predators, and which people in the tribe had betrayed them before, they survived to pass the wiring down to you. The ones who spent their mental energy noticing sunsets and lovely feelings and how nice the breeze felt didn't have that same survival advantage generation after generation. Scientists call this the negative bias. It's the one critical comment from your boss that can undo 10 compliments from everyone else in the room. It's why you have a wonderful day with your family and still lie awake at 11 at night replaying that one comment that stung. It's why we remember awkward things we said at dinner years ago in vivid detail, but we can barely recall the dozens of moments that went beautifully. It's not a personal flaw. It's not you being too sensitive or too negative. It's inherited wiring built from a world that most doesn't truly exist anymore. So let's talk about what actually happens inside your body when that switch gets flipped on, because I think it helps to understand the mechanics and not just the concept. There's a small almond-shaped structure in your brain, and it's called the amygdala. Think of it as your internal alarm system, sitting there quietly scanning. Its job is to detect threats, real or perceived, and sounds the alarm in the instant it senses one. Here's the problem. Your amygdala can't always tell you the difference between a real threat, like a car swerving towards you on the highway, and a perceived threat, like an email from your boss that starts with, we need to talk, or a text from your teenager that says, hey, just call me. Both can trigger the same exact alarm system. Your body doesn't know the difference between a tiger and a text message. When that alarm goes off, your body releases a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is generally used in short bursts. It sharpens your focus, gets your blood flowing to your muscles. It prepares you to react quickly if you actually need to run or fight or move fast. But when cortisol is flooding your system consistently because of a deadline, because notifications, conflict at home, financial pressures, the ping of your phone every 4 minutes, pulling your attention somewhere new, your body starts living in a near constant state of low-grade emergency. That is stress, not just the emotional feeling that we casually tossed around at dinner when we say, oh God, I'm so stressed. The actual state of your body that generally believes it's under threat hour after hour, day after day. And when your body believes it's under threat, it shifts into what's called survival mode. In survival mode, your brain is not interested in your long-term goals. It's not interested in your creativity, your relationships, or your joy. It has one job: get you through the next 5 minutes. That's why when you're overwhelmed, it's so hard to think clearly, to be patient with your kids, to be present with the people you love the most. It's not a character flaw. It's not you it's not you failing at being calm, patient person. Your biology is doing exactly what it is evolved to do, just at that wrong moment for the wrong kind of threat. And here's the part I want you to really hear though, because this is where it gets hopeful. This is actually wonderful news because your brain isn't fixed. Your brain has something called neuroplasticity, which is simply its ability to change, to rewire, and to build new patterns based on what you repeatedly practice and pay attention to at any age, at any stage of life. If your brain learned to prioritize survival, it can also learn to prioritize joy. If it's learn to scan for danger, it can also learn to scan for what's good, what's working, what's beautiful. Neuroplasticity means the wiring you have right now is not the wiring you're stuck with forever. Every single time you practice gratitude, notice something beautiful, choose connection over isolation, or gently interrupt a spiral of negative thinking. You're literally reshaping the pathways in your brain, not metaphorically, literally. Physically. So hear me on this. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not failing at happiness because something is fundamentally wrong with you. You are working with a brain that was built for survival in a world that no longer requires constant survival mode. And nobody ever sat you down and taught you how to retrain it. So let me give you a small concrete example of what this looks like in real life. Think about the last time your phone buzzed with a notification that you weren't expecting late at night. Your heart rate probably ticked up just slightly before you even looked at the screen. That's your amygdala doing its ancient job, treating an unread message like it might be a threat crouched in the grass. Most of the time, it's nothing. A sale at a store you shopped at once, a reminder about an appointment, but your body reacted anyway because it can't tell the difference between real danger and modern noise. Now, here's where the hope comes in. The same brain reacts the way can also be trained slowly to recognize when it's overreacting. You can teach it through repetition that not every buzz is a threat. You can teach it through repetition that stillness is safe, that joy is allowed to exist right alongside responsibility. That retraining is not a one-time decision. It's not a switch you flip during a good podcast episode and never think about it again. It's a practice. Think of it like a path through a field. The first time you walk through the tall grass, there's no path. No path at all. And it's slow going. And the grass fights back with every single step. But walk that same route again tomorrow and the next day and the next. And eventually the grass gives way to a clear, worn path that your feet find almost without thinking. Your brain works the same way. The thought patterns you walk through most often, whether that's worry, self-criticism, and threat scanning, or gratitude, calm, and curiosity, becomes the path that are easiest for your mind to find. Right now, most of us, the well-worn path is the anxious one because we've walked this way most times in our life. The good news is you can start walking a new path today, and it will get easier every single time you walk it again. And that practice is exactly what the rest of this episode is all about. So why high achievers really lose themselves? I want to talk about something I see consistently in my work and something I lived myself in real time for years. The people who look like they have it all figured out are often the ones quietly falling apart, really, I'm going to say fast, very fast. If you're a high achiever listening to this right now, and if you are the one who always gets it done, the one people call when they need something handled, or the one that the color-coded calendar and the 5-year plan already mapped out, I need you to lean in to this part because achievement feels like it should create happiness, doesn't it? That's the whole story we're told. Work hard, set the goal, hit the goal, feel amazing. So you set the goal, you hit the goal, you should feel good. And it does for about 20 minutes. And then what happens? You immediately start looking at the next box to check, the promotion, the next title, the next award, the next revenue number, the next certificate on the wall, the next thing that will finally prove you're enough. Psychologists call this the hedonic adaptation. It's the tendency for human beings to quickly return to a stable baseline of happiness, no matter what happens to us, good or bad. Researchers have studied this in people who won the lottery and people who experienced devastating setbacks and found something almost unbelievable. Within about a year, most people's happiness levels return close to where they started, regardless of which direction of life just threw them. You get the raise you've been dreaming about for 2 years, and a few weeks you feel amazing. You tell everyone, you celebrate, and then slowly, without even noticing that exact day it happened, it becomes your new normal. The excitement fades into the background of your life, and you're already scanning the horizon for the next thing to chase. This is why the promotion doesn't feel the way you thought it would. Why the new house stops feeling new after 6 months and starts feeling like, just the house. Why crossing the finish line of a goal you worked years for can feel strangely hollow, almost anticlimactic. You're left standing there thinking, oh, that's it? It's not that something is wrong with you. It's that achievement was never designed to be a permanent source of happiness. It's a hit, a quick spike of dopamine, and then your brain resets and the baseline, and you start looking for the next one. If you're building your entire identity around achieving, you end up on a treadmill that never stops, because the moment you slow down to actually enjoy where you are, some part of you feels like you're falling behind, that you're wasting time, that you're getting soft. I lived exactly like this for multiple years. Building companies, taking on more, always more. Even launching this brand, you go back to old behaviors, you just take on more. Saying yes to everything because saying no felt like admitting weakness. Measuring my worth by output of how much I could get done before noon. If I was producing, I was okay. If I wasn't, I felt like I didn't have a right to rest, let alone actually enjoy my life. Here's a question that eventually cracked it open for me, and I want to leave it with you today because I think it's the most important question in this entire episode. If achievement is who you are, what happens when the achievement disappears? What happens when you lose your job? When the company doesn't make it, even after you poured everything into it? When your body forces you to stop, whether through illness, burnout, or something even harder. If your entire identity is built on what you produce and the producing stops, even for a reason, who are you underneath that? For me, the question wasn't, the question wasn't hypothetical. Life eventually forced me to sit with it directly in a season where I couldn't produce my way out of what I was facing. No matter how hard I try, no matter how many, lists I made. And that where I started to understand in a way I couldn't unlearn that happiness was never going to come from the next achievement. It was going to have to come from somewhere else entirely. Somewhere I hadn't been before. I think about the entrepreneurs I've known who finally sold the company they built from nothing, the thing that they've been chasing for a decade. And instead of feeling triumphant, they describe feeling almost grief-stricken, lost, unsure what to do with a Tuesday because the goal had been the identity. And once the goal was met, there was nothing underneath it holding them up. I've seen the same people who finally crossed a finish line they trained years for, a marathon, a certification, a dream job. And instead of the deep satisfaction they expected, they felt uncomfortable itch to fix the next thing to prove themselves. That itch is not a flaw in you. It's what happens when your nervous system has been trained to only feel okay while it's climbing towards something. Rest starts to feel like danger. Stillness starts to feel like falling behind. And the finish line, once you finally reached it, stops meaning within days, because your brain has already moved the goalpost without asking your permission. There's another layer that I want to name because I think it's just as common and just as quiet. It's called comparison. High achievers rarely just compete against the goal. They compete against other people, often without even admitting that's what's happening. The colleague who got promoted faster, the friend whose business seems to be scaling effortlessly from the outside, even though you have no idea what their actual numbers look like or what it's costing them behind closed doors. The version of you is built in your head of that you're now measuring your real messy, ordinary life against. Social comparison is exhausting precisely because it's a moving target dressed up as a finish line. There are always going to be someone further along by some metric, in some category, or on some given Tuesday. If your happiness depends on being ahead of everyone, you have signed yourself up for a race that never, ever, ever ends. Because the moment you catch one person, your attention just shifts to the next one ahead of you. And I want to say this plainly because I need someone to say it plainly to me. You are not allowed to stop competing, not stop growing, not stop caring about your work. Just stop measuring your worth by what you rank against somebody else's in their highlight reel. That's exactly where we're heading next, into what the actual research says creates real, lasting happiness. And I promise you, it's not what most of us were raised to chase. So what science says actually creates happiness? If achievement isn't the answer and chasing the next milestone isn't the answer, what does the research actually point to? I want to walk you through this like a list of ingredients because it's really what it is. Happiness isn't a single switch you flip or a single moment you arrive at. It's closer to a recipe made up of small, ordinary, repeated ingredients, none of which look impressive on their own. The first and probably the most well-researched is relationships. There's a well-known study out of Harvard that has tracked people's lives for over 80 years and one of the longest studies on human happiness ever conducted. And the single clearest finding across all of it is this: the quality of our relationships is the strongest predictor of a long, happy life. Not income, not fame, not achievement, relationships. That means the coworker you check in on, the friend you finally call back after putting it off for weeks, the parent you visit even when you're tired and would rather stay home. That's not a distraction from a meaningful life. That is the meaningful life. That is the whole point of it. The second ingredient is gratitude. Not the greeting card version of gratitude, the kind printed on a throw pillow. The practice version. Studies consistently show that people who regularly write down or name specific things they're grateful for report higher life satisfaction, better sleep, and even improved physical health over time. Gratitude works because it directly counters that negativity bias that we talked about earlier. It trains your brain to notice what's already good instead of only scanning for what's wrong, the tired or missing. The third is meaning and purpose. Happiness and meaning aren't identical, and this distinction matters more than people realize. You can have a pleasurable moment that, has no meaning at all, like scrolling your phone for an hour and feeling vaguely entertained, but emptied afterwards. Or you can have a difficult, exhausting day that is deeply meaningful, like staying up all night with a sick child or working through a hard, honest conversation with someone you love. Research shows that people who describe their lives as meaningful, even when those lives are objectively hard, report far greater long-term well-being than people who simply chase pleasure. The fourth is flow. Flow is the state where you are so absorbed in what you're doing that you lose track of time entirely. For some people, that's writing. For some, it's cooking or gardening, playing music, building something with their hands, fixing something that's broken. Flow matters because it pulls you fully into the present moment, and the present moment is the only place happiness actually lives. Not yesterday, not a year from now, right now. And the fifth is the act of kindness. This one surprises people every time I mentioned it. Doing something kind for someone else lights up the reward centers in your brain even more reliably than doing something kind for yourself. We are wired for generosity, not in a vague feel-good greeting card way, but in an actual measurable neurological way that researchers can actually observe. And the sixth is awe. Awe is what you feel standing at the edge of the ocean or looking up at the sky full of stars, or far from the city lights, or watching your child do something for the very first time. Researchers have found that awe shrinks your sense of your own problems just for a moment and reconnects us to something bigger than ourselves. Something we are a small, quiet part of. You don't need a plane ticket or a national park to assess it either. Awe is available in a far smaller doses than we assume. The way frost forms on a window overnight, the scale of a thunderstorm rolling in, the fact that your body somehow knows how to heal a cut without you telling it how. The seventh and eighth are physical movement and sleep. I put these two together because they're often the first things we sacrifice the moment life gets hard. And they're two of the most powerful tools we actually have access to every single day for free. Movement regulates the same stress hormones we talked about earlier, with cortisol included. Sleep is when your brain literally processes and files away the emotional weight of your day, sorting through it while you're not even conscious to interfere. Neither of these are luxuries reserved for people with more free time than you. They are maintenance for the machine that runs absolutely everything else in your life. And the last one, connection, ties every single one of these together like a thread through beads. And here's what I think is worth naming out loud. None of these 10 ingredients are exotic. They don't require money you don't have, time you can't find, or a personality transplant. A phone call to a friend, a single sentence of gratitude before bed, 10 minutes of a hobby that makes you lose track of time, a walk around the block, going to sleep 20 minutes earlier. Every single one of them is available to you today for free, regardless of your income, regardless of your job title or your zip code. So why don't we default to any of them? Because modern life is quietly built to pull you away from all 10 at once. Notifications interrupt connections. Comparisons drowns out gratitude. Busyness crowds are out there in flow. Hustle culture treats rest and sleep like something you can earn only after everything else is done, which for most of us means never. Knowing the ingredients isn't actually the hard part. Most people, if you ask them, could list several of these without much prompting. But the hard part is protecting space for them in a life that is consistent, relentlessly pulling your attention somewhere else. That is not a willpower problem. That's a design problem. And once you see it as a design problem, you can start designing your days differently on purpose. And I want to bring this back to something personal, because I think research only really means something when you can see it live and you can see it lived out in your actual life. A few years ago, I went through a stroke. It stopped me in every way that I noticed nothing else in my life has. It was a surreal moment, not a deadline, not a difficult year in business, not a crisis I've ever faced before, my own body. And in that season, I couldn't perform my way through it. I couldn't achieve my way out of it. I couldn't outproduce it, no matter how much willpower I tried to throw at it. What actually helped me heal wasn't a new goal or a new title or a new 5-year plan. It was the people who showed up in ordinary, unremarkable ways. It was my daughter's voice on the phone checking on me twice a day. It was the family I left drift a little far while I was busy being successful, coming back close again without a single dramatic reunion, just quietly, meal by meal, phone call by phone call. It was the small moments of gratitude I've never used to notice, like being able to walk across a room without thinking about it, or say a sentence clearly all the way to the end. And eventually it was purpose again, but a completely different kind of purpose than the one I had been chasing before. Writing became that purpose. Speaking became that purpose. Sitting here with you right now, being honest about what actually happened instead of performing that everything was fine, that became a purpose. None of that comes from a promotion. It came from relationships. It came from gratitude, meaning, and reconnecting to the people I love. The ones who were there the whole time, waiting for me to come back to them. That's the researched, lived out in real life, my life. And every bit of it is available to you, starting far smaller moments than a health crisis has to force on you before you finally pay attention. I want to be honest with you about something. I don't say any of this to suggest that everyone needs a stroke or a breakdown or a diagnostic to finally slow down and rebuild. I'm telling you my story because it's the one I know from the inside. But you don't have to wait for your body or your circumstances to force the lesson on you. You get to choose it now, today, while everything is still intact. That's the whole point of this episode, which brings us to how you actually started building on this day by day without waiting for a crisis to teach you the lesson the hard way.